Okay, video is going to be a little shorter because I'm having trouble moving such large files from my phone to over Wi-Fi to my laptop. So this will be a lot shorter. Let's move along and see what we can get done. I want to talk about what I've worked on in the last 24 hours. I've taken StatZilla, which was a statistics collection package, and I have taken it away and moved it into K2. It's called K2 Stat now. All the files there that begin with K2 Stat are your metrics collection capabilities. But I specifically want to talk about how I'm integrating the API. So in K2, we have a basic API package, and it just kind of has some really basic stuff in it, like status v1, a JSON message, JSON response, assert bearer token, and get bearer token. So this will kind of be a utility package for API calls. And then we have a K2 API.SQL, and that kind of gets our API going. We're using the base path is now a configuration variable in K2 config. So you kind of set your base path. It's just set to API right now, which is fairly generic and should work for your application. So basically you can install K2 and everything that you get that's part of the API there. It looks like it's your application. So in theory, if you want to build an application that has no front end, eventually you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to get a user account. You'll be able to get your tokens and then start making API calls. So if you wanted to build an app on some other platform and just use K2's capabilities, you'll be able to do that. You as a developer will also be able to easily build out backend capabilities and expose them the same way I'm doing here. So this gets us kicked off with a module, and basically we just publish the status and we call that K2 API status v1. And so that's that. And then each kind of service in here, like K2 Stat, has an API. So it's really basic. Just to begin with, this kind of forms the intermediary step is the K2 Stat API package. So we've got a procedure for update stat and a procedure for create bucket. Now in theory, you don't need these. You could call the K2 Stat right easily on your own, but then we need to kind of create maybe a little bit of different interface there. I like to separate it. So my API is here, and then my K2 Stat API is where I define the module that is going to actually, am I defining this module twice? I think I am. I think that needs to get out of there, right? Yeah, that's that actually duplicates that. So we're going to get rid of that. But the templates, and we don't need a status template. Yeah, but it's a little bit duplicated. I've been moving things around. Okay, so then we have a handler. It's a get handler. This is also status. This is a different way of doing status, and I had this here just so I could remember, because there are so many ways of doing things that I'm still learning and trying to remember. So a lot of this is going to get cleaned up. Getting down to submitting a stat. So we have a stats. Our pattern is stats, so it would be API/v1/stats, and then we're doing a get request, and this is our handler. We're using a PL/SQL handler. And we're using some of the built-in K2 capabilities here. So we're checking that our token is valid. If you generate a token with K2 token, the user has that. They're submitting an API call with that token as access token or as a bearer token. This will validate that it is valid. We could also use that to determine who the user is. Then we're actually making our API call to update a stat. And then we're returning a little JSON response, just says message, and then it has success. And this would be message error. You can actually change the key from message to something else with one of the parameters in this. And setting status 200 or status 400, fairly generic. But that calls one of the obviously going to call one of the procedures here, which is ultimately the interface into stats. So that's how all the APIs are going to work. It's just going to build out from there, and then your app API would basically be the same thing. You do it the same way. You create a app API package. That's your intermediary steps for what you want to expose for your app, and then you create app, API.SQL, which kind of defines all your handlers. You can do it any way you want, of course, but that's the way I'm doing it. That's where I'm doing it with chart density. So anyway, that is an update there, and I'm going to post another update in a minute on some of the project goals and what I'm aiming to do with K2. I'll do that in a different video. Thanks.